Peak Recovery presents Facing Addiction Podcast.
We have a whole generation that we've lost to fentanyl. Just last year, 100,000 people.
You know, even though I didn't want to believe that it was happening or
to respond in healthier ways so that we could give them the best chance that we could.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Facing Addiction Podcast. I'm your host, Tyler Tisdale. I'm the founder and CEO of Pinnacle Peak Recovery. On today's episode, we have a very special guest, Brendan Mcdonough. He's the sole survivor of the Granite Mountain Hotshots. Brendan, welcome to the show.
Yeah. So like you said, the lone survivor of the Granite Mountain Hotshots, and kind of my addiction story wraps like many of us throughout my entire life. So starting in childhood, I think there's some factors that lean into that. Single mom, had her own mental health struggles, addiction struggles. My dad wasn't present for, my younger years up until probably really up until a few years ago. And so, as I started to grow up, hindsight's 2020, right? And I was looking for a way to fit in with people, and I was never like a straight A student. Mm-hmm. I was never really good at, sports or anything. I enjoyed playing sports. I grew up like many of us, football, soccer, t-ball, all those things. But as I got older, I'm small, skinny. So some of those sports just didn't work well. And I felt this like emptiness inside of me. And I think that was just because a lack of like a family system. And so I bounced between my grandparents and my mom up until I was about 14. And so I started using at 13. So alcohol was first and then marijuana shortly after. And it really filled that void, but it also gave me a way to connect with other people. And so being able to look back on it, like I just wanted connection. And my brother, he was older and we really never connected when we were younger. He was kind of like the tough older brother.
How older? Or how much older?
4 years.
Okay.
So when I was in middle school, he was in high school, and he had his own set of issues he was going through. So it was like we never had that opportunity to make that connection, that you kind of see in the movies, which, I mean, most people don't have that, that go down our path. And so it just kind of progressed through high school, and was smoking weed, drinking, partying on the weekends. But I lived this like double life. So I had these high morals from one standpoint of like, I'll never touch hard drugs. They need to increase the time that they spend in jail. There needs to be more consequences, just kind of this weird conundrum. And, I'd be all out all night, Friday night, wake up Saturday morning, at like 6 a.m., go work all day or community service. It was interesting,
And that was after high school?
That was during high school.
Oh, okay.
And I got my wisdom teeth pulled, and I feel like there should be a study done on this because so many people I hear of like either a sports injury when they're in high school or their wisdom teeth get pulled. And that's when the opioid piece kicked off for me. Like I just loved the high. I love what it did for me. I was so hooked that I called the dentist up, and this was 15 years ago. It's like the opioid crisis was there, but we didn't comprehend it, right? All the false advertising they had and false marketing and just things that the Sackler family put together was just insane, right?
Yeah.
And
Did you see the documentary?
Yeah. Yep.
Crazy.
It was good, but it was sad because they just, when you have that much money and power,
well, we lived it too on the other hand. Yeah.
Yeah, we lived it out. We were those other statistics that weren't out there. And, for me, I remember going through the first bottle and I had a refill, and I called the dentist and I said, hey, I dropped the bottle in the toilet. Can you guys send me another refill? It's like, oh yeah, sure. Not a problem. We'll talk with my mom, call my mom. They sent over the refill. So I had an extra bottle. And then like 4 of my friends, they got their wisdom teeth pulled. They didn't want them. I did. So so like here I got, 4 or 5 bottles of opioids at 15, 16, and it was off to the races. From there it was pretty much, started getting into mushrooms and kind of anything I get my hands on. But at that age, I just saw it as a party thing.
Mm-hmm.
I was still going to school, still playing sports, kind of maintaining like C's and B's.
Mm.
You know, I remember the first time I ditched class was like senior year. But I had the setup. I lived 10 houses away from the school. So I go home for lunch, smoke, pop a few pills, snort some, you know, sit on the couch, veg out, not out, go back to school. And it wasn't an issue. And I graduated high school 2009. I wanted to get in the fire service. I grew up in Southern California. So I grew up next to Camp Pendleton, which is a Marine Corps base.
Yeah.
And so when I was in elementary school, 9/11 happened. So I watched so many men and women go overseas. I watched my friends lose their parents, their brothers, their uncles, their cousins. And it kind of instilled a piece of service in me. And so when I was young, I loved going to church. When I was in middle school, was active in church and homeless ministry. And, you know, those drugs really took captive of my life. And I had no clue. You know, like many of us, right?
Yeah, I didn't know either.
We're just having fun.
Yeah.
You know, and there's other people that are doing it. And at that age, like you maybe had like one or two friends in high school that passed away from like a drunk driving incident or overdose incident. And it's like, well, you know, we all had the excuses. Well, they did liquor and pills. They should have just stuck with beer and pills, whatever it was that we justified it. And so I graduated and got in the fire academy when I was in college. And I thought to myself, well, college is supposed to be a party. Like this is the point in time where like Girls Gone Wild was insane, right? So all you're seeing on TV infomercials and you're hearing about Chino State being the #1 party place and ASU and all these other things. It's like, well, this is a part of it, you know? And so I just kept running with it, but I found an area that I succeeded in and I was learning with my hands. And so through that fire academy and going through college, I really found a passion for the fire service and, you know, the want and desire to serve others. But I didn't understand how entrenched I was in addiction. I didn't comprehend it. No one in my family had really been through that process or successfully had come out of it. And so, and if they did, it was one of those things that was very hush hush, very quiet, very, you know, on the down low. Like I didn't learn my grandma. She was an alcoholic and attended AA for like 10, 15 years.
Oh, wow.
I had no clue, you know, and, you know, my mom when she was younger. And so just things your family doesn't talk about until you're well into your 30s. And those family members that are kind of on their way out are sharing those stories to give you history, you know? And so I didn't pick up on any of that. So I was out doing the dumb stuff, right? Running and gunning, partying, stealing here and there, you know, trying to maintain this double life standard. And I get into my second semester in college and I'm taking my EMT class. And within like the first month, I flunk out. And so it's one of those classes, like many medical classes, you have to get a B or better. And if you flunk one test, you got one more shot to take it. And if you don't pass a B or better, you're out. There's no excuses. There's no, you know, retakes. There's nothing. And so my mind wasn't ready for that. And I wasn't in the right headspace to do so. And I just kind of went down that path. I was like, all right, I'm going to party more and I'll pick up next semester.
What school is this, by the way?
That was Yavapai College up in Prescott.
Okay.
And so I grew up in Southern California and I moved to Prescott about 13. And that's kind of when the drugs and alcohol kicked in.
Got it.
I'd smoked weed once in California, maybe twice. I was like 12. I tried it, but
Did you get high the first time?
I didn't.
Me neither.
And I don't even know if it was weed or not, you know, like, one of the older guys in the apartment complex, he like gave me it was a tire stem.
Oh, wow.
Like a bike tire stem to smoke out of.
Okay.
And he packed a bowl in there.
Yeah, I think I know what you're talking about.
And he cut it out of the tire tube. And I think my mom was gone that evening or something. And I was just out hanging alone with a buddy of mine. And we tried smoking it and nothing ever happened. But the next time I had smoked, it was out of a bong and it was chronic. And this was 2003, 4. So it knocked me out.
Yeah.
It took me out. It dragged me out, but it was what I wanted, you know, it was what I thought I had needed. And so that just continued on and I flunked out, started partying more, getting in more trouble. The pills were getting expensive. And then someone was like, why don't you try heroin? I'm like, that's for junkies, man. Like that's gross. Right. Yeah. He's like, well, it's half the price. I'm like, huh. That's smart. And they're like, well, it's cleaner, And I'm like, cleaner? What do you mean? It's a cleaner high. And I think honestly, the saving grace for me was I was deathly afraid of needles. Like, I grew up wrestling, boxing, had no problem taking a punch, throwing a punch. My brother was 6'2", 220 his freshman year and used to toughen me up, right? He wanted his little brother to be tough. And so physically, it wasn't like this pain fear, but I was deathly afraid of needles and almost like a phobia. Even at 16, when you get your shots, right? I'm like screaming, crying, and then the next day I'm getting in a fist fight with someone smiling with, my nose broke. Like it was weird. And so I started smoking heroin, and there was one time a buddy of mine was like, hey man, I'll shoot you up. Like you don't have to look or anything. And I remember he tied me up and had the rig, and I couldn't do it. I was sitting in a chair and I started freaking out, and I started having a panic attack. And I'm like, I don't used to feel this. Like I used to get away from that. And so I kept using. And that summer of 2010, I had, was in a relationship and we broke it off. And then 2 weeks later, I found out she was pregnant with my child.
Oh, wow.
And so at 19, I'm sitting there strung out pretty much and kind of living my best life. Right. And I'm gonna have a kid, and I'm blown away. Like I'm a child myself. Right. I don't know how to be a parent. I don't know how to be a father. I didn't have a father growing up, and my mom, she did her best, right? She put a roof over my head and kept me safe, and, was able to, help me out when she could. But even then it was at best kind of, what she knew, and her childhood and upbringing wasn't that great either. And so I had this desire to be a dad, and I wanted to be the dad that I didn't have, but I didn't have the tools. And so that kind of began the journey of trying to get back into the fire service and trying to quit using. And so I was trying to clean up my life, but it just had that grasp. And that was the first time I'd actually tried to quit. And I remember getting dope sick and just saying, I can't, there's no way, I'm not doing this. And so I'd go a few days, use, go a few days, use. And eventually, December of 2010, so that was summer of 2010, December of 2010, I get arrested on theft charges. And I was in a gym. It was my old wrestling coach's gym. My best friend from high school who did really well, 2-time state champ, had a college scholarship to go wrestle. He was in town with his parents because they still lived in town, and he knew I was trying to get my life back on track. No one really knew how bad it was either. I was just using with like 3 or 4 people, kept it specific to that. I was still judgmental, even though I was using heroin. I still had this thing in my head. Well, I'm not them. Yeah. Just this complete delusion of what the truth was. And so I kept it a secret from everyone. Even my daughter's mom had no clue. She was completely oblivious to this. And I get arrested, go to jail. And I was looking at, I think like 3 or 4 felonies at the time. I'm sitting there in a cell, and my daughter's going to be born in March. And I'm like, dude, what the hell are you doing? And my dad had taken off when he was 2. And then he spent, the better part of 10, 12 years in prison. And I'm like, Brennan, at least your dad was there to see you be born. Like you're not going to get to experience that. And suicide had crossed my mind. And I'm like, if I have to do anything over 5, like I'm out of here. Like I don't want my daughter to have to grow up with that. And I go before the judge, and kind of said I'd lived this double standard. Had things going for me. Like I completed the fire academy, and my mom was trying to send me to military school. We couldn't afford it. So I was in the ROTC program, just fighting every inch of it. But I went to leadership camp and excelled there, and had some community service work that I did. So I had these good characteristics about me, but it was literally teetering. It was like one more thing was going to tip the direction of my life. And the judge had saw through some of the charges and was like, there's no proof of this, there's no proof of that. And in short, me and a buddy had stole some stuff out of one car, and there's a string of break-ins, and they were trying to pin a handful of them on us. And they just had no evidence. They followed us for probably 4 or 5 months. And I remember seeing them coming out of my house. And I was like, man, they must be watching Jimmy down the street because he used to grow pot. He got busted. I'm like, dude, that dude's stupid. Like, I can see him from my house, but they're actually watching me.
Oh my God.
And
the delusion.
The delusion, right? And I'm sitting there and I'm like, this is insane. And it just started all piecing together. And the judge gave me a second shot. He was like, hey man, I see that, you've got a daughter on the way. You're trying to get back into school. You're trying to do the right thing, but like, you need to get your life straight. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to let you out. You're going to be on probation for, I think it was 2.5 years. And we're going to give you an opportunity to change your life and to be a dad. But if you come back here, like, it's over.
Yeah,
you're getting the book. Like on those charges, I'm going to bring those charges back up and whatever else. And it's going to suck. And I remember the arresting detective was just like, I could see it on his face. He was just like, I'm going to see this kid again. That was a resentment, right? And I was like, I'm going to prove this guy wrong. Like, I'm going to go be something. And so I get out December 28th, I think, right after Christmas, spent like 5-6 days in jail. Nothing big, not trying to sit here and, I spent a hard time, get those people that say that. And it's like, that was enough to wake me up. And I'd seen enough family members do enough years that it was like, I don't want to live that life. I don't want to be a part of it. I don't want to be in fear. I don't want to, do things that I don't want to do and have to do them for survival. And I get re-enrolled in that EMT class, but now I've got a felony. And I remember I get re-enrolled and it's Prescott, so it's kind of small. And so one of the instructors knew, and he was like, hey man, like you can't get hired anywhere for 7 years with the felony. Like after it's dropped, 7 years. And the judge told me, he said, hey, if you complete probation, I can't remember what the term is, but he's like, it'll be like it's never on your record. You'll have a misdemeanor.
Oh, that's awesome.
I'm like, thank God, right? It was my first time getting arrested. I should have been arrested many times over for selling, driving under the influence, stealing, all these different things. And the one time I get caught is for something that I was kind of a part of, but wasn't. Mm-hmm. But that's the way it works. And that's God's intervention. And so I get back in my EMT class and I'm doing well, but the people, places, and things, right? Like I had no recovery knowledge. Like I didn't know about meetings. I didn't know about detox. I didn't know about treatment. I had no knowledge of any of that. And so within like 3 weeks, I'm back to using. So I'm in this class trying to grind it out, Tuesday, Thursday, every evening. And I'm just trying to participate, trying to be there. And I hear some guys talk about an opening on a hotshot crew. And they had like, I think 2 or 3 people that had washed out. It was a small town, so everyone kind of knew, like, stay away from Brennan. I was kind of one of those people. You don't want them working on your fire department because I'm going to steal the rig and take it to a body shop kind of deal.
I was like that too, yeah.
And and so I overhear them and they tell one of the guys, like, hey, show up at 9. And like my addict mind's like, I'm going to show up at 8. I'm going to beat him to it. And so I wake up that morning. I was working construction, just dead end work, day labor, stuff like that, just trying to piece things together. And my daughter had been born at that time. And I was just so full of shame and guilt that I didn't even want to see her. I didn't even want this newborn child to see me in this state. So I was kind of avoiding her, avoiding my daughter's mom, and just trying to piece life together on my own. Really didn't have no direction. I showed up that next morning and I don't know if you've seen the film or not, but there's a scene where I walk in to the station. I'm looking pretty raggedly and it's pretty true to the T. I see someone I know and they're just like, what are you doing here? You lost? I'm like, I came drop off my resume. I heard y'all are hiring. And one of them was like, man, not today, not never, better luck somewhere else. And I knew that was coming. I knew I was going to have to face that. Like the chances of someone hiring someone like me are slim. Mm-hmm. And so I was on my way out. I opened the door to the exit and the superintendent was walking out of his office and the 2 doors collided. I'm just kind of like stunned there staring at him. And he's like, do you know what a door's for, son? I'm like, yes, sir. He's like, we'll either walk through it or close it. I'm like, oh God, I'm stupid. So I shut the door. He says, what do you got there? I had my resume and certificates. I say, hey, I heard you had an opening, but I heard you're full. So, if I could drop this off with you, that'd be great. And he goes, we actually have one open spot. Can you do an interview? And I'm in work jeans with paint. I've got a tank top on. And for some reason, I thought to tuck the tank top in. I'm like, that's so dumb. And so like I go to pull it out, and I guess I didn't pull the back end out. So that was still tucked in. And I'm thinking in my head, like, I'll come back on Monday. I think it was a Friday. And I was like, I'll come back on Monday. I'll go find some dress slacks or steal a tie or whatever I got to do to come in here to look proper. And he said, come sit down right now. I'm like, oh shit, this is real, And I'm thinking in my head, I'm like, man, you have to be honest, because like they're gonna find out. They're gonna find out your record. They're gonna find out your drug use. They're gonna find out everything. Like anything that's on paper, they're gonna know. And anything that comes up in that cup when you had a UA, they're gonna know what's up. You can cheat that, right? That UA, yeah. You can cheat that, but eventually, if you keep going down that path, they're gonna figure it out,
right?
And so we sit down and we start talking. I thought it was just gonna be me and him. He invites in like 5 other full-time guys to come in on this interview, and I'm just getting grilled, man. And I'm sitting on a love seat. Are you married?
Yeah. And
so like, this is like a seat you and your wife sit on, like turn the fireplace on, watch a movie, drink some hot cocoa, whatever, like 'tis the season. Mm-hmm. You snuggle up, but like eventually you're going to part ways because that couch is too small. Mm-hmm. So 2 big dudes sit right next to me, and like instantly I'm just like a child.
How uncomfortable is that?
Yeah. And 6'2", Jesse Steed, Marine, 210 pounds, just all man, right? Just all man meat, like tan, fit, right? The deal, right? Everything you imagine about someone being a hot shot or a first responder or military, being fit, clean cut hair, clean shaven, all those things. That's what he had. And the guy next to me, same deal, 6 foot, 210, played defensive linebacker for like a D2 school or something like that. Just grew up on a ranch punching cows probably at like 8, right? Just an animal, right? And I'm sitting here 145 pounds soaking wet, and, was on and off using, and we're going through these questions. And I've always had this gift to talk. Like I tell people all the time, I should have arrested a million times. I talked my way out of it so many different times. I'm flabbergasted at how it's even happened. Like I was racing down one of our streets, and we had 4 bottles of open liquor in the car, and we didn't, nothing. They're like, wow, you're doing 30 over. I'm like, what about the guy next to me? And my buddy's like, shut up, dude. Had drugs in the car and, just stupid stuff, and didn't get arrested. And so I'm talking with them, but there's these questions that they ask on any job interview you can't lie about. Like, what's your record look like? What's your driver's license? What's your work history? What's that look like?
Did you have a driver's license?
I did at the time, but it was previously suspended. And they had asked that question. It was funny you brought that up. And they were like, hey, do you have a driver's license? That I do, but it was suspended. And, I paid the fine. I didn't know how to do a class. I'm signed up for the class, blah, blah, blah. And I'm explaining to them how I'm on probation. I just got out of jail 3 months ago. And here I am sitting applying for this fire department job where you're not supposed to get hired for 7 years with a felony. So they're just all kind of shaking their head. And, I remember Eric Marsh, the superintendent, he asked me, he said, hey, what's integrity to you? And I didn't know what that meant. I knew what the word was, but I didn't know what that meant to me, and I didn't have it. And so I just gave him the run of the mill answer, like, hey, being honest and doing the right thing, and, being there when people need you to do the thing that need to be done when no one's watching. And I'd never done that. And so I can see the guys in the room that are just like, after hearing my record, I'm like, hey, I have a felony. Once I complete probation and community service, it'll be done. And I can just see the room temperatures just dropping right through the floor. Like if they didn't know me, they knew me now. And Eric looks at me and said, why are you here? He goes, and I better answer quick. I'm like, I've got a daughter. I just want to be the dad I never had. And takes a second. He goes, here's the deal. I don't even know if I can hire you. I don't even know what HR is going to do. I'm going to give you a shot. And if you can get through HR, here's 2 rules. Give 110% and don't fight nobody. You say that. I come to learn why. And I'm sitting there ecstatic, and I can see some other people around the room. Like, I don't even want to look at them because they're glaring at me. They're like, dear God, we got to deal with this kid. And so he calls up HR and he's talking with her on the phone, and she's mad. Fire departments, I don't know if you know much about them, but there's always 110 applicants for 5 positions.
Yeah, it's competitive.
It's super competitive, right? And it's like, you got the bottom barrel right now of the talent pool that you're about to give a job to. She had family members that were applying. And like, here I am getting this job.
Yeah, she must have been pissed.
Yeah.
What do you think they saw in you?
Come to later find out in life that my superintendent was in recovery.
Oh my God. Okay.
And so I think he saw me and him.
Yeah. That's so cool how just God puts us in situations like that.
Yeah.
You just hear about that with like judges, attorneys, other things.
Yeah. And if our eyes aren't open, we'll miss it.
Yeah.
And especially when we're in that addict mindset, like it's really hard to see those things.
Mm-hmm.
And so she's finally like, just set him down here. I'll figure out the damn paperwork. I don't know if she said that. I don't want to make accusations, but she's upset.
Yeah.
And Jesse took me down there, and I remember he was pretty frustrated, and I was trying to start conversation with him, and I'm like trying to lighten the mood, and he's just not having it. He's like, dear, like dead weight we got to carry. And so I go down there, fill out the paperwork, and it's supposed to show up on Monday for a run. And I'm excited. Like, I'm through the roof. Like, here's my childhood dream. I just got picked up by a fire department at 19 years old. My daughter's about a month old. Like, my life's going to change. Then I'm sitting there thinking like, dude, I'm not in shape. These guys have been training all year, multiple years for this. Like, I haven't ran over 2 miles in 3 years, let alone I've been using dope and out running and gunning and partying and drinking and whatever I could put in my body. And I had smoked heroin like 3 days prior, maybe.
So you're still using?
Yeah, still using. And so Monday I show up, we go on a run, dead last. And we're about halfway through, and Eric stayed back, and he was in his mid 40s. And I was like, he's the brains, right? Why does he need to run? Like, we're the horsepower. He caught me on this effing run, like halfway through. And I hear his breathing. I look back and I'm like, oh shit, I'm gonna get fired. But there's a slight piece of me that was like, maybe he's gonna give me the motivation I need. So he's running with me, and I can hear the frustration, his breathing, of how slow I'm running. Like, I'm 6 foot, 150 pounds. I should be able to run fast. And it was not the case. I was just flat footed, had no form, no cardio, nothing, but I just kept running. Like, I just knew in the back of my head, you can't quit. Like, you got to give 110. Like, you have to do this for your daughter. Like, there's no other option. Like, it's either this or go kill yourself. Like, you either succeed or you die. That's what has to happen today. And we get to this steep hill. I'm looking up at it, and I'm like hoping the trail veers off. Like, I see another trail marker, and I'm like, please God, I don't want to go up this hill. And we're getting to the bottom of it, and he just looks over at me very, very nonchalantly. He's from Carolinas, very southern, slow, calm. He says, hey son, you quit today, you're going to quit the rest of your life on your daughter. And just takes off up this hill. And my initial thought was, I was so mad at this man. Like, how dare he say I would quit? And it was like, that's all I've ever done, though. Like, all I've ever done is quit. All I've ever done is stop. All I've ever done is blame others. All I've ever done is, it's not my fault. It's their fault. It's the systems. It's my mom's. It's my dad's. It's the dope man's. It's my friends. It's never my fault. And it was like, I'm done. I don't want to live like this anymore. I don't know what it looks like. I'm fucking done. This life, this old me, it has to die today. And so I get done with the run, and he asked me, he's like, hey, did you quit running? Did you give 110%? I said, sir, obviously you see me ran, so I don't know if you call that running, but I definitely gave 110% and put in a maximum effort. And it was time for push-ups. And in that moment, that was such a transformational piece of like, I'm done quitting on me. Like, I'm done saying I'm not enough. Like, even my close friends were like, brutally honest, like, you're not going to make it, man. There's no way. I had friends that were training professionally to fight. I had my close buddy who was, wrestling at a major college. And he's like, Brennan, like, what did you get yourself into? And I'm like, exactly what I need. And I quit cold turkey, man. Never looked back. On
Just
heroin.
withdrawal on your own?
Yeah.
Wow.
I remember the first week or two, because it was all PT and physical training, just like going to bed, and I was couch surfing and I was living out of my car because I still couldn't face my family. And I remember taking like IB 800s because I was so stiff and in so much pain. And I remember we'd be on PT hikes and runs. I'd be crying in pain, like you ever get that lift, like you're out of the gym for like 3-4 months, you go do like a full body lift and everything just hurts.
Yeah.
That was every morning. And like the only way it would go away is by pushing through it. Like every morning I had to just push through the pain to get that lactic acid out. And as 145 pounds, we go on a few mile PT hikes. We have 40, 50 pounds on our backs. Just even carrying like 10, 15 pounds on your back with straps and not being used to it. My shoulders were rubbed raw. The boots that we wear, they're leather. And so you have to break them in. They're hard. They're heavy. And, the way you break them in is you boil water and you put it in there because it molds to your foot. And the only way that hard ass leather sole that's stiff molds to your foot is by wearing it down. Like you're forcing your will upon this boot to make your imprint, right? And you boil water, you pour them in there and you wear them wet till they dry. My feet have blisters or bleeding. I've lost a toenail. Like it was intense. And I had to keep showing up. And I remember I felt like my feet were glass. And my body was just deteriorating and I'm just trying to eat. I'm just trying to survive. I'm trying to fly under the radar. I'm the slowest dude at the PT hikes, the runs. So I'm obviously being noticed. I was hired a week later after the other rookies. So like usually all rookies get the same amount of shit, but I got shit from the rookies, which I'm like, this is jack. This is not how this works, dude. Like you can't be giving me shit. You got 7 days on me, but I had to just take it and be a duck, like water on a duck, man. Just let it roll off my back. And I had to take constructive criticism and I had to be able to analyze and go, okay, that's the truth, man. What they're telling me is the truth. And if I want to make it here, I got to listen. And so the first 2 weeks were extremely painful. Honestly, the first 3 months were. I popped my first fire about a month and a half in. I finished my EMT class. I actually graduated the class. I remember talking to probation. I don't know if you've been on probation, but to leave the state, like you need a 2-week notice, right? Our callback time to go fight forest fires was 2 hours.
Did they make an exception?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I said, hey man, I called them up and I was chatting with them and I said, hey, I got hired in the fire department. There's an issue though. Like if I get a call to go out of state, like I got to be ready in 2 hours. That's when I'm off. If I'm on the clock, it's 1 hour. And my gear needs to be loaded. My bags need to be ready and I need to be ready to go. And he's like, why'd you take the job? I'm like, it's legitimately the only effing place that would hire me. It's my dream job. I'm like, I'm not trying to be that guy, but I'm going. Like you can come find me in the middle of the forest. Like I'm going. Like whatever you got to do, whatever needs to happen, like I need your help. He's like, shit, how do I explain this to my boss? I'm gonna let a probationer leave. And I'm like, I'm going to be in the middle of the woods. Like you can talk to my superintendent, my captain, whoever you want. Like there's no option to screw up. And he's like, all right, here's the deal, man. You need to call me every single time. And then when you have cell phone service, you need to check in. And I had like T-Mobile at the time. This is 2011. Like T-Mobile sucked.
Yeah. You didn't have much cell phone
Yeah. And as a hotshot, like you get sent into like the steep, nasty, dirty places. Like that's where you go. Like that's what hotshots do. I remember rolling up the first fire. I'm like, how intense do you think it's going to be? Do you think it's like flat ground? And the dude was like, Carl, hot Carl. He's a redhead buff, ran a saw, awesome dude. He's like, just get that out of your head now. You're a hot shot and we only go to steep, nasty shit. So like, just be prepared for that every single time. Like get that out of your head that it's flat. It's not going to be easy. It's going to be hot. It'll be 110. Fire's going to be ripping. Like just get it out of your head. Like there's not going to be an easy day here. Just accept it. Like just live with it and enjoy it. And hopefully if you make it, you might find some fun in it. And I was like, and he's like yelling it at me, right? He's just turning red, and I'm like, yeah, Carl, yeah, yeah, cool, thanks, man, appreciate the advice.
Yeah.
And we hit our first fire. This was kind of another pivotal moment. It was down the Chiricahua Mountain Range, with Southern Arizona, and this thing was like from like zero feet elevation all the way up to like 9,000 elevation. This thing was ripping, and it was steep, disgusting terrain. And we get flown in, my first time ever in a helicopter. The doors are off. I'm just like tripping out, wigging out, man. I'm just like, this is too much to process. Like, I don't even know how to comprehend this. I start getting some major anxiety. I'm like, what did I get myself into? And I'm like, just shut up. Like, the two people in my head were battling. Like, what are you doing? You don't belong here. Just shut up and listen and show up. And so I kept doing that. And day after day, I just shut up and listen. I remember going to bed some nights crying because my legs would cramp up. Like, I was just not physically there, but every day I showed up and every day I put in 110. And I remember thinking to myself, like, if these guys are okay here, I should be okay here, And I started to gain the trust of the crew and started really building relationships. And a handful of us had gotten sick. And so when you get sick on a fire, you got two options. You either keep working and get paid, or you can get off the fire and not get paid. So it's like, I got to get paid. I got diapers. I got baby food. I got things I got to pay for. I got court restitution. I got all these different things that I got to take care of. And one night it was so bad, I drank NyQuil. And I just needed to sleep. And I was coughing, hacking up, had a fever. And I woke up the next morning, and Eric came to me and said, hey man, either go to the med tent or fucking take your bag further out. Like, you're keeping us up. Like, go to the med tent. Like, it's okay, you can go. And in my head, I'm thinking like, that's the way out. Like, this stuff is still crazy to me. Like, I'm fighting fire. Like, I'm pseudo having some weird experiences, physically exerting myself. And I'm like, okay, that's my way out. I remember this other guy, Brandon Bunch. We went to school together, and he was sick, and he was a little smaller than me. And he was sicker than I was. And I was like, hey man, you going to the med tent? He's like, nah, dude, it's not for fucking hot shots. I was like, shit. So I was like, looks like I'm not going. So I just rode that out. And I remember he rolled his ankle, and his boot was so swollen. His ankle was so swollen. He had to like halfway tie his boot, and he just kept working through it. Just an animal, man. And you just see the work ethic, and you see the camaraderie, and you see the integrity that these men and women have out there. And it's like, you want it, And I'm like, man, this is an opportunity to leave the old me behind. Like, I could really die to my old self here and create something transformational that I never could have done on my own. Like, I can go from being a felon junkie to a productive firefighter community member within a summer. And so I just kept showing up, dude. Fought fire that entire season, no injuries, made some close friends, close relationships. Had some guys that really helped me through some stuff. I'd end up splitting with my daughter's mom. So the single dad, and they just tremendously were there for me, stepped up. When she got sick, I had no clue what to do. Buddy's wife was a nurse. Travis's wife was a nurse, and she helped me. And so it wasn't only just like turning me into a firefighter, it was like turning me into a man, like an actual man that was productive, balancing a checkbook. What does it look like to buy your first house? What does credit look like? What is being responsible with your money? We were gone at 2 weeks at a time. And so the only bills I had were rent, water. So I'd come home to a 2-week paycheck. I didn't have to spend no money on food. Like, it was just Copenhagen and snacks. That was it. That's all I had to spend money out there on. Like, I didn't have to buy hotels, didn't have to buy Gatorade, didn't have to buy medicine, none of that. It was all pretty much provided. I just needed to show up and put my head down and get after it. And after about 3 months, I was finally at like a physical place where I wasn't, slowing them down. I wasn't, at night, I wasn't cramping like I was, in my body transformed. Like, that beautiful body I wish I had today, right? Where I'm like, man, take me back to that.
I was wondering how long it was going to take you. to get in shape. That is brutal. The mental fortitude that you had is incredible to go through that. I'm just thinking back when I was detoxing, how uncomfortable and miserable it is.
Yeah.
And you just got thrown in the pretty much like boot camp.
Yeah. That first run was a 10K run.
Incredible.
And it's like, I remember hitting the first mile and I'm like, there's no way. And David Goggins talks about all the time. I've had a chance to talk with him a handful of times, and it's like, man, 90% of it's mental.
Is that the Navy SEAL guy?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And Brandon Bunch, he told me, he said, man, it's all mental, dude. It's all in your head. Just keep showing up. Just shut up. Put work in. And he grew up on a ranch too. So you get these different personalities combined, and you start learning things really quick. I mean, we're sleeping side by side. You're 2 weeks at a time, usually for a full fire season, 2 weeks out on a fire, 2 days home. You might have a little bit time home, but usually it's back to back. And so you're in the same vehicle all summer long. You're spending more time with them than you are your own family, wholeheartedly, even throughout the entire year, because you're going to go back to an 8 to 5. You're going to see your family in the evenings and weekends. I mean, you're spending deep time. And so you have to get to know people very fast, very quick. And that, in the beginning I was pushed to my limits, and I almost fought one of the guys in the crew, and he ended up being my best friend. And he was like, dude, I need to know what you're capable of. Like, that's what we're out here to do. Like, my life depends on you. Like, if you can't show up physically or mentally, like, I'm screwed. Like, you need to watch my back, and I need to watch your back, and I need to know that you can do this in high stress situations. Like, when shit hits the fan, where are you going to go? Are you going to go to the corner and crumble, or are you going to step up and make decisions and be able to call things out? And I didn't see it as that at first, right? I'm like, this dude just riding my ass. But he was just trying to form me to be the person that he could trust. And it radically changed my life, within a summer. And I remember getting done with my first season, and you're a seasonal employee, most of us.
What do you do in the off season?
A lot of guys go be ski bums. So go up to the mountain, they'll work the ski patrol or something like that, or they'll pick up part-time work. And interesting enough, I worked for a city fire department, which Granite Mountain Hotshots was the only city employed hotshot crew at the time in the nation. And so they had seasonal work for brush removal, so fuels mitigation. And that's kind of the time when, like, if you earned your stripes is when they ask you to come back. So like, if they don't ask you to come back, like, you don't have a job offer. And so I remember we were kind of winding down for the season. It was over. Usually there's a hard set stop date. And that's just part of overtime, part of fatigue. Like, as I did more seasons, I realized, like, in the beginning I needed to bulk, put on weight, because you're just physically exerting yourself to the point where, like, you're starting to lose muscle mass because you're working so much. You're carrying 50 pounds every day, and you're hiking 2-3 miles in just to get to the piece of work you're going to do. And you're cutting line, digging line all day, take a 10-15 minute lunch break. It's extreme temperatures, extreme terrains. There was that first fire I was on, I worked 38 hours straight one time. And it was like, I lived off Copenhagen and instant coffee for 14 of those hours, And I remember me and Carl, we were sharing, because it got cold. We were at 9,000 feet and we were doing a burn, and we had a rain poncho, and it was cold at night, man. At 9,000 feet, it's dropping down. There was snow at 11 or however high it was up there. And so we popped under the rain. We cut the rain poncho, and both of us popped in there back to back just to keep heat in. And you're just pushing your body to the limits, man. And by the end of the season, like, the 6-pack went away, you're not as toned, and you're just kind of worn down and beat down. So they take all that into consideration of how many overtime hours you're working. Like, a good season was like 1,000 overtime hours.
Wow.
So you'd work between, let's say April and October, you'd work about 1,000 overtime hours. And I got the call back, man. They pulled me in the office. My nickname was Donut. They say, hey, Donut, man, we'd love to have you back. I was doing everything I needed to do for probation. I was just on the right track in life. I was doing community service. I got done with my community service. My PO was like, hey, man, would you be willing to do more? And I'm like, would you be willing to let me off earlier? And he's like, I can't do that. And I'm like, well, I can't do that either. But I had no clue what recovery was. Mm-hmm. And so I went on to fight fire for another season, just learning more. And that's when I really found my physical stride. The first season I was able to kind of keep up, and there's an art to hiking I didn't really know about and guys talked about. And I'm like, nah, not really. But the way you step, the way you move, the way you carry your weight, how you wear your pack, just those little details that make a huge difference. Ounces make pounds. And so it's like, okay, why are you carrying, all this food? Like, do you need all this food? Like, what does your body actually need? How much water do you need? What do you need in excess just in case? We have fire shelters, we have files, we have batteries for radios, just all these different things in that pack that we carry. And so I was starting to really understand, okay, like if I shift my weight, just the dynamic details of being a hotshot, but still new. And had a great time fighting fire, loved it, was going into my third season and wanted to be on either full-time there or move to the structure side. And so I had that conversation with my superintendent, and usually he was not supportive of that because the track was guys would come, be a hotshot for 2 years and then bailed and get hired on the structure side. But we had such a phenomenal relationship that he just knew that that's what I needed and my daughter needed. She was going through some separation anxiety. So like when I had her and I'd get called to a fire, I had to take her to my mom. And then we had to like play a switcheroo, and then I had to take off because she would just melt down for like hours and hours and hours. It started taking a toll on me where I'm like, man, am I being a good dad? And I'm arguing with my ex. We're back in court. And I remember my superintendent, he pulled me aside one time. I was on the phone. I said some pretty disgusting things to her. And he's like, I can't say that, man. Like, I don't ever want to hear that come out of your mouth again. Like, you can get arrested for some of the shit you said. We're in middle court custody battle, and it's just not good, not healthy. And I'm like, I need to go home. He's like, you go home, you lose everything. Who's going to hire you? You still have a felon. You're still a felon. What are you going to do? What are you going to do that's going to put you on a career path? And I just wasn't thinking straight. And I didn't understand how far into recovery my superintendent was until after he had passed. But looking back, I seen the way that he just had the ability to talk with me and talk me off the ledge and really bring the truth to what was happening. He's like, this is where you need to be. You have 20 other men that are willing to fight for you. What do you want to do for them? Like, stay president today. And I'm like, let's go get it, And I get into my third season and life's kind of wishy-washy, but I'm dedicated. And I told him, hey, I'll finish out this year. I'd like to test after. If I don't get hired, I'd like to come back for a fourth year. I said, max, I'm looking at 5 to 6 years on the crew. He said, that's great. I was moving my way up, and we had fought some fires early on that year. We get called to a fire in Yarnell, and kind of a run-of-the-mill fire, nothing too crazy. We've been on fires 200, 300, 400,000 acres, massive fires. And this fire was kind of right around the monsoon season. So kind of thinking in my head, like, hey, it might rain, might get a weather event, dry lightning. The opportunity for this thing to pick up is there, but the size wise wasn't as much. And so we get down there that morning. I can't even remember what time, but we get briefed on the fire, and we're the first hotshot crew on scene. It's kind of just tucked up in the mountains. It's really not threatening much. And our thing is just to get around it as quick as possible and safe as possible and kind of wrap it up. And Prescott's the rodeo town. So I'm like, man, if we can get around this thing in like 3 days, be home for a night, hit the rodeo, go party, spend time with my daughter, see the fireworks, perfect timing. That's kind of what's going through my head. So I'm like, work hard, be smart, and there's been times we get to fires like that where we'll only be there a few days and we'll go home, or they'll call us to a different fire. So it's not uncommon. And we get hiking in there, and I just remember it being hot. Like it was abnormally hot and humid in the mid-morning. And usually like a lot of alpha males, right? In that kind of environment. And so like when you're hiking to a fire, like unless it's an extreme distance, like you're not stopping for a break, you're just getting there. You can drink water, you got your Camelback, you can grab a snack, you can talk, chat, whatever, but we're moving with purpose, right? Like we have a job at hand and we need to get there and get this job done. And halfway through, our captain stopped us and was like, "Hey guys, it's gonna be a hot one. Like, drink some water." I kind of see him sweating. I can feel myself sweating. I'm like, this is gonna be a good day. Like, we're gonna earn our work today. When we get to the top of this mountain where the heel of the fire is, so where it starts. So heel, and then wind, topography, other things push it in its direction. So this is kind of a wind-driven fire and topography. And we start working around and we're checking things out, and end up being asked to be the lookout. So lookout watches the fire. I take weather. I got a weather kit, and it's not a glorious job, right? It's like a job that needs to get done, but it's a job that kind of no one wants to do, because you're just sitting there. You're literally just sitting there staring at the fire, watching the guys, staring at the fire, watching the weather, checking this out, checking that out. So it's not, and like for me, I'd rather be working because then it's keeping my body moving, but when you're not in motion, it's just kind of, and it's hot as hell. There's no shade. So you're just like baking, It's like, "Hey, Donna, you want to be the lookout?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I'll do it." Yep. Because it was a part of my task book and I needed to do it. And I'm like, "Not a problem. Where do you want me?" "Oh, I want you down there. I want you to watch this fire if it comes up this drainage, or if anything starts below us," because they were fighting fire mid-slope, which can be kind of dangerous, and going direct on it. And through a series of events, they tried going indirect. A plane dropped water on their burn, so that stopped that. The fire kept pushing north and it was threatening a community. So it was moving away from us. And about after lunchtime, I had cracked open an MRE and took in the weather and shared that. And there was, over the radio, we got a weather update that this weather event was coming in to town, and it was going to bring gusts of like 55, 60 miles an hour. And it was going to supposedly turn this fire around. And I hadn't fought fire for 20 years, right? But I'd seen quite a bit. And during that 2011, 13 era, there was those kind of massive fires were becoming very, very more common. And so I had that experience, but some of the more extreme fire behavior I just hadn't. I've seen some fire tornadoes and stuff like that. And I've seen, 100,000 acres burn up in a few hours. And I've sadly seen homes lost and stuff, but something that extreme is pretty intense. And I remember listening to it, wrote it down on my hand or something. And then I relayed it to my captain and superintendent. They said, "Hey, yeah, we copy the weather." And way off in the distance, you can kind of see some clouds forming.
Like a dust storm?
Like a monsoon.
Yeah.
And so a part of that was, earlier I kind of touched on it with the monsoon season, like it could bring heavy rain, which is awesome. Like that'll help with the fire tremendously. Even just the cooler weather will bring the relative humidity up and the probability of ignition will lower. So even just cooler weather is great, but dry lightning is huge because it can start another fire, and then the winds can really change and dictate where the fire moves and how it goes. And, man, where was I going with that? And I had seen
you saw
I'd seen it way off in the distance, and I was looking at my watch and I'm like, man, they said it's going to hit in an hour. I'm like, it's kind of far out, but I'm not a meteorologist. Like, it's not my job. I'm just here to report what I'm reading and seeing. Mm-hmm. And so we're chatting about it over the radio, and then it kind of just, hey, keep a look on it, keep watching what you're watching. And the crew could see me, and I was further north than them. They could see where I was at, and I can make out figures, but I know who was who. So we were pretty relatively close. And as I'm sitting there eating my lunch, I start to kind of feel the wind pushing back on me. And I'm like, man, what is that? And so I can see the mountain, and then way off in the distance, I can see the fire kind of going north. And I'm trying to see if there's these little valleys. I'm like, man, is it kind of backing towards us? Because fire will run uphill 90% of the time. So it's like, I know that's going to happen. So there might be a little bit of fire, and it goes down, and it slowly burns, and then it picks up, and then it kind of goes down. And we're talking maybe, like 10-foot rolling hills, and then the mountains that they were in. So kind of watching it, looking at it. And man, the weather, it shifted rapidly. And on the north end, there was a bunch of engines that were working around homes that were threatened, and it was still pushing north, but it was kind of shifting a little bit. And they get pulled out of there. So they were engaged in the fire, trying to protect these homes, and it's too much. It's moving too fast. And as the day goes hotter, fire activity increases, and they get pulled out. And I'm like, man, it's pretty intense. Getting pulled off a fire, you know, it happens, but this fire's starting to make its move, and I'm sitting there thinking, like, I'm not going home tonight. Like, it's going to be a long one probably. And as it's pushing north, the weather starts to change, and this fire starts to move from like north, and so we're due south pretty much of the head of the fire. So that's the main part that's really pushing. That's the part where you see the big plume from, but the whole fire, you know, usually is active to some point, depending on how long and many other factors. But, and it starts moving northeast. And so just like a clock would go 1, 2, 3. And so it's pretty narrow because it's wind driven, but now it's just widening. So it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, but it's still kind of going north. And so finally, when it hit like northeast, like that fire had hit this sector, it had started to turn around. And so Yarnell, the community in Arizona, was that community that was threatened. And so as that started to turn around, they're evacuating the community of Yarnell. And so it happened so quick and fast that they weren't as well prepared as we could have been for that evacuation. And it was pretty chaotic. And so the fire starts turning around, and I'm closer to that edge. Now it's coming towards us, and it's quite a distance away, but it's moving. But I didn't feel that 60-mile-an-hour wind yet, but I could feel the gusts. And so I radioed to my captain soup. I said, hey, time for me to get out of there. They just say, hey, we're just about to hit you on the radio too. Same thing. You know, we got eyes on you. We can see you. You can get out on the road. Why don't you go grab the buggies? Another crew had reached out to my soup and said, hey, we'll grab your vehicles, because they were going to get burned over, because we had initially drove in and try and park relatively close in an area that, you know, we believe is going to be safe. And with what we had been told that morning, it should have been a good spot for them. And we planned to work down to them. That had changed. And so that other crew's headed towards the vehicles, and I start hiking out to the 2-track road. So just a dirt road that, you know, go 4-wheel on, you could take a truck on it. And as soon as I get to the end of the road, I look over and I see this fire, and it's like, it's picked up in intensity. And earlier that day, that same soup that was picking up our trucks told me, he was meeting with my superintendent. They had a meeting of like what the plan of attack was going to be, and just sharing some stuff. He was in a UTV. And so he was like, hey, do you want to ride down there? I'm like, yeah, of course, man. I don't want to walk all the way down that thing. And so I hopped in with him. And before he left, he said, hey, if you need anything, we're down here. So if you need a ride, whatever, just give us a call. And he had the wherewithal to know that if he didn't come pick me up, I was going to get burned over. And so I'm looking at this fire in the distance. It's turned around, and I can see the flame lengths they're probably 20, 30, 40 feet flame lengths, and it's starting to move towards my location. And as soon as I hit that 2-track road, I was like, I was going to hit him on the radio. I can't. I'm going to need to deploy my fire shelter. And it was like within milliseconds, all these thoughts, right? Like, when push comes to shove, when shit hits the fan, what are you going to do? Like, I sit there and I don't know what to do. Or am I going to sit there and think, okay, these are your crew can see you. They know where you're at. You have a place to deploy your fire shelter. I can go back up the hill to them. It's going to be a treacherous hike, but I can get back up there. And instantly, dude's bombing down on the UTV, and he comes up, picks me up. He's like, "Don't get in, man. We got to move your vehicles." And so he drops me off at the vehicles. He's like, "I got to go pick up some other crew members, and we're going to come back and grab your buggies." And so my crew's watching, and, you know, they're like, "You guys got time? It's getting close though." They said, "You know, Donut Dale, Blue Ridge, we'll come meet you in town. We'll come pick up the vehicles." I said, "All right, copy, I'm out." So we grab the vehicles, and at this time, the fire's threatening the north end of town. And so like, this is our last ditch effort. This is our last chance to kind of save this community. And they've got a dozer that's punching in line. So the goal of wildland firefighting is remove the fuels and hopefully it won't burn over. If it burns over little spots and stuff, we can kind of pick that up. But hopefully if you remove it far enough, let's say the fire's coming this way and you remove, 20 yards of fuel in between it, it should stop, right? So we take it down to bare mineral dirt. So that's what that dozer was doing, trying to cut around the town. And I get plugged in with this other hotshot crew. They say, hey, we need you on the north end. We need you to bust out some chainsaws, put in some line work, put fire on the ground. And so we get there and we park, and their superintendent was like, hey, I want you helping with one of our sawyers. So Sawyer's guy's got a chainsaw. He has a swamper who helps him. And then sometimes there's someone who helps him. And so I said, all right, cool. Not a problem, man. And so he gets out, he goes to fire up his chainsaw, and he throws his chain. His chain was too loose, so it fell off. And in between the time that it takes him to put his chain on, the time that we had to pull out of there was maybe a few minutes. It's like the rest of the crew is kind of hiking in front of us. They're maybe, 30, 50 yards. They had started working a little bit. And the rest of the crew I was with. And by that time, they had already turned around, and we were getting what's called a spot fire. And there are embers that are flying over our heads. So over our line, shoot, dude, at least 100 yards.
Wow.
Like deep.
This because the wind was so
intense.
Oh, wow.
And like that wind event had finally come. And we're seeing it. And so there's some engines with us. They're trying to put it out. And it's like at the point where it's like, we're done. Like they've evacuated everyone they can evacuate. They feel confident in that. Like we're out. And so we get pulled out. And during that same time frame, my crew was making their way to their safety zone, and which I can't recall. There's a lot I can't recall about it, but I can't recall if I heard that over the radio, because the entire crew was together outside of me. So most of our conversations were face to face. And so like, I really don't know a lot about their decision making or kind of what went into it, just kind of piece it together from what we think happened. And so they're making their way down to their safety zone. And we had been told this wide window for this weather event to hit the north end of town. And like what was an hour happened in like 15 minutes. And so we get pulled to the main highway. And I remember we got called to this restaurant parking lot, and everyone was getting pulled off the fire. My crew was the only crew that was, close to the fire, in between the fire and where we were at. And we had this ranch that was a safety zone that we would fall back to. And they were headed that way. And I remember looking over to my right and left, and I'm seeing this fire just rip. And it's like, hey, we just lost our first home, second home, 5, 10, 15, 20. And I mean, this thing's cooking, like it's moving with purpose. And I'm thinking to myself, man, where's my crew at? And I see this old guy, he's on a stretcher. Like that's how fast we had to evacuate. Like there's, how many other firefighters on the side of this highway. And then there's like community members that are evacuated on the highway because they can't go up the hill and they can't go down. They can go down the hill, but some don't have vehicles or, not able to. And so there's an ambulance with the old gentleman. He's got oxygen on. He's in a stretcher. And I'm like, dear God, like what? Like, how did this come to this? And I hear over the radio that they're trying to request a water drop and they're getting ready to deploy their fire shelters. And I'm like, what the fuck? What's going on? That hike to where they were to that safety zone with the time frames we were initially given should have been done. Piece of cake. Not a problem whatsoever. They could have beat that initial weather event by an hour, but what had happened was there was another cell storm behind it, I guess, pushing it. Mm-hmm. And I just remember the wind being so strong, and we're watching this community burn down. Now my brothers are deploying their fire shelters, and now it's like Mayday, right? You watch the movies, and it's like, we have to get in there. We got to do something. And so they're trying to organize a medical team. You know, you got 19 guys that are about to get burned over. They're asking me like, hey, who's there? And I remember telling them like everyone but me. And I remember seeing the look on the dude's face, and it was just like, oh shit, like what's going to happen? And like seeing that look on his face made me like, my head starts turning. You know, and I'm praying. I'm like, God, please let them get through this. Like, they got the experience. They got their fire shelters. They know what they're doing. Like, hopefully they can get a water drop, cool that thing down before it gets to them. And there's just so much chaos, and they can't find them. They don't know their exact location. And they've got a helicopter up trying to find them. They got the plane that's trying to get guided in by a crew member. In the background, when you hear my superintendent calling, you can hear the chainsaws ripping. They're trying to remove as much fuel around them as possible. And we're watching this fire go through, and I have a general idea of where they're at. I'm sitting there on a map, and I'm like, yeah, we talked about taking this 2-track down and then jumping down into this ranch. And, you know, could they have popped out here, stayed in front? I don't know. That could have been a different decision they made on the fly. And we're trying to get radio communication with them. We're gathering EMT supplies. We're getting ready for a mass burn over. And I remember the superintendent, the captain on the crew I was with, I think he was I'm pretty sure he was an EMT, and he'd been in the field for a long time. So he grabs a few guys, and I'm grabbing all our medical stuff off the truck. So I'm trying to get in the truck, and he's like, you need to stay here. I'm like, F you, like I need to go. He's like, you need to stay the fuck here. Like, you're not going. Like, if we need you, we'll come get you, but you need to stay here right now. And so they're trying to get in through the community back into the closest route to them of that ranch. They know they're headed to the ranch, and we just got to put the pieces together. And they can't get back there. Like, the fire is just way too hot. It's just blowing and going. There's propane tanks that are sending up 60-foot flames. Like, it's chaos. And they had a DPS helicopter, I think with a paramedic or EMT on it. And they're trying to track him down. This fire is moving through the community. And he finally comes over the radio, and he's like, I got eyes on him. And I can see in the distance the helicopter kind of hovering, and I'm like, man, that's right by the safety zone. I'm thinking they're right there. And see the helicopter land on the top of the mountain, and what felt like hours was just minutes. And, you know, can't see the guy walking down, but he walks down to where they had deployed their fire shelters, and he comes over the radio, and he's like, I've got 19 confirmed. And in my head, I'm like, yeah, man, I told you there was 19. I told you what tools they had. I told you everything that I could about what was going on. Like, yeah, there's 19 confirmed. How the hell are we going to get them out of there? Like, what are we going to do? They have air evacs on the way. They got ambulances on the way. They're preparing for massive burns. And then it hit me. Like, they're dead. And it was like I had everything I could ever want for 2.5 years. Like, just a dream, you know? I had men that loved me. I had a daughter who understood and who I was present in her life and fighting for. And within the blink of an eye, it just all fucking disappeared. And I see my chief from our department, and like, he's trying to keep it together, and this fire's still burning. It doesn't stop. It's not like, oh, okay. Like, wildfire is the only natural disaster we fight. Hurricanes come through, we prepare on the outside, and then when it comes through and does its damage and carnage, we come in. You know, tornadoes, same thing. And it's the only natural disaster that we combat. Volcanoes, we got nothing to do. Earthquakes, we got nothing to do. We can build better. But wildfires are the only ones that we're able to combat, and it is so risky. And we mitigate a lot of those risks by learning from the lessons of loss. And, you know, that was the largest loss of life since 9/11. was one of the largest losses of life in the wildfire community ever. There's maybe a handful of other incidents that have happened like that, to that kind of magnitude. And I'm sitting on the side of this road and I'm just falling into myself. And thank God the crew that I was with, we had fought fire previously, and 2 of the guys I'd went to school with, one of them I played football with, because if not, I probably just walked off and just never came back. I probably just disappeared. And I'm crying, snot, and it's such a tight-knit community that so many people are on that fire, fought fire with those guys, went to school with them, knew them, and it's like, man, what just happened? Like, my body was in shock. And they're trying to, with tragedies like that, they're trying to not have the family see it on the news. So that's like the number one goal, is the families not to have to see this on the news. And so they're trying to track down 19 families before this news breaks. And, it kind of gets fuzzy for me, but I remember they did an all radio call and they said, hey, don't say nothing. We need to inform the families. Like, you guys need to keep this private. Don't post anything. And this is 2013. So social media was around, and it's like, don't talk to nobody. Don't talk with your families. We'll give the all clear. And I was sitting in one of our buggies. And so there's usually like 8 to 10 dudes in a buggy, and I'm sitting in the front seat and I'm crying. And my buddy's got my phone. He's like, hey man, don't call on your own right now. My mom's, and it's starting to break. Like, the news is starting to break. They don't know which crew, they don't know who, they don't know how many, but the news is broke that a crew just got burned over, and there's been a lot of guys who just passed. And I remember I was sitting there, and I feel the center console vibrating. What's that? So just like this phone's here, open it up and I look at it and I'm like, fuck, it's my brother's wife. And the reality hits me that a phone will never be picked up. Videos of his kid, learning how to do stuff, ride a bike, all that stuff that you look forward to, will never get seen. And the magnitude of this, like, I couldn't understand. And I'm hearing, and in my head, I'm thinking to myself, like, man, maybe someone made it, or maybe, I don't know. And it starts to become night, and the fires died down, and they have firefighters watching over my brothers. And I go back to the camp, and you're supposed to do like a debriefing and all this stuff. And I mean, it's just so massive that it's not like any other incident in a long time. And I run into 2 people. One is a gentleman who helped me get into fire, and one was my kind of like Boy Scouts, but it's fire explorers. He was my instructor, and he was on that fire. And one of the gentlemen, he had called my mom. He had knew her. He had worked with her in the Forest Service. And he said, hey, I called your mom. I'm going to have you dropped off there. And then my explorers guy, he was like, hey, the families are meeting at the school. I said, I want you to take me there. He said, a bunch of the former crew guys. So I worked on the crew for 2.5 years, but there was guys that came and go, had promotions, etc., different crews, structure life. And they're all calling me and they're asking me, like, what happened? And I don't even know how to answer. I can't even answer my phone. Like, I don't even know what to say. And I just remember texting him, like, I'll see you at the school. I'm sorry. I carried so much of that weight of, like, I should have been there. If I'd have just got burned over first, they would have been in a different situation. God, why'd you have to take these good men? Why couldn't you just took in the junkie? Like, why can't you just let me go out at least being something to my daughter? Because 2.5 years ago, I was ready to just kill myself in a jail cell. I was ready to die before I wanted to be seen as anything other than what I was. And I go to the school. I see some of the former crew guys, and we're crying, and I can't even explain. I can't even get words out. And they said the families are in a gymnasium. And so there's cops everywhere. There's probably 300 people at this school. The news, they've got they're trying to get something. They're trying to see something. They have no clue what's going on. They haven't even shared the names. And the families had found out that lived locally, and they called the other families that were out of state that their loved one had just passed. And I walk into this school of, I feel like it was like 50 family members and friends. And they had known, but until they had seen my face, that's when I feel like it hit them. And I couldn't be in that room. I couldn't be in there. And so I walked in, couldn't keep my composure. I see widows crying, their children, their loved ones, their uncles, their brothers, their dads, their moms. I can't be. And so I walk out and find a corner, and I just fell into myself. And for the first few weeks, I remember having these like nightmares / dreams that someone had made it and they were in the hospital. They're so fucking vivid that I remember waking up and calling. So they had at the middle school, now there's like 100 and some people involved in this incident. Like there's nonprofits, there's the fire department, you have 19 families to deal with. Like this is like an incident. There's like a wildfire. It has to be managed. They have funerals. They have all this crazy things to deal with. We were calling down there. I'm like, hey, how are they doing in the hospital? They're like, what are you talking about, man? I'm like, isn't he in the hospital? He's like, no. And my mind just fucking tormented me. I turned to drinking. I was like, man, I don't want to go back to dope. Like, I know that's going to lead to death. I can't. If I get caught using that, that's going to be a horrible look. And so I just started drinking heavy, man. I was binge drinking every other night, downtown, drinking. Would get asked to go to this fundraiser. I remember golfing at a place down here, and I was so hammered, man. By like the 9th hole, I was golfing barefoot, at a place that probably cost $500,000 to get, a pass into for the year. And I remember news cameras. Like I hadn't spoken to anyone. They attached a PR person to me, and they had made an agreement or something with ABC to do a special because they wanted to make sure that my brother's story was told right and properly, and everyone wanted to break that initial story. And they had found out that I had survived. And so like I couldn't even go home to my apartment. My roommate, Chris, was my best friend. He passed. His bedroom was in there, man. I remember one night going in there, laying in his bed and just fucking blowing snot and crying. And his door wouldn't open. So I just headbutted the door and just punched my way through it. And his family's calling me and like, hey, we need to come pick up his things. And I'm like, take your time. And it took like 3-4 months. I had to grab clothes. I'm living from couch to couch and I'm just broken. Like I'm just dead on the inside. And I remember golfing and like the guy's got his camera up and so I turn around and I start whacking him at him. I'm just angry. And I attended like 14 different funerals within a week time frame. And I couldn't attend all 19 because it just wasn't possible. Like I had a detail attached to me for 3 days with kind of a pass. Like it was a fire department car with lights and sirens. And that's what I got drove around in 3 days to attend funerals. And some family members, hey, can you bury this ashes? Can you do this? Can you carry this casket? Can you? And it fucked me up. And I remember when they were down in Phoenix, because the morgue up here couldn't handle it. They were doing the autopsies and everything, and they bring him up for the procession. And so many people who were part of Arizona remember that. And it was like just a all-day event of bringing my brothers home, and they're in the hearses, and they're like, hey, do you want to help bring them in? And in my head, I'm thinking they're in caskets. And I'm like, yeah, of course. And they were in bags and like carrying their body. And you don't forget those things, you know? And they were like, hey, do you want a moment alone? I don't fucking know. I'm like, yeah, sure. So I'm in this porch area with my brothers, and I'm having this conversation, and it's like, I'm sorry, but I wish I'd have just died. Like if it could have just been me, if, you know, or at least, God, why couldn't I have just died with them? Now I got to live with this for the rest of my life. Like, I'm not going to make it. And that guilt and shame took over for a long time. And so for the first year, it was pretty much just all funerals, fundraisers, and stuff like that. And when that kind of passed, I was still drinking heavy. And during that whole time frame, I was approached about writing a book. And I didn't really know what to do. I didn't know whether to say yes. I had no clue. And so I consulted with some people, and I reached out to some people. Marcus Luttrell, the movie Lone Survivor, Mark Wahlberg portrays him. And I had sent him a message, and he was so busy that he ended up getting back to me. He said, hey man, like someone in his team got back to me, and I talked with his wife, and she's like, hey, we'll put you in touch with someone to do this. And I talked with Marcus briefly, and he was like, you need to honor them. Like, I know it's painful. I know it hurts, but like, you have to move past this, and you can't be selfish. Like if you don't tell it, someone is. So I started writing the book, and a lot of controversy around that. And, the movie, even more controversy because people were like, well, it shouldn't be a movie, and just so much different things. And I remember just talking with people that kind of been through similar experiences of, you know, going through a tragedy and it being portrayed in a way, and they're just like, what greater way for their legacy to live on than to be in a film, you know? And so we pushed forward with that, and it turned out amazing. And I was still drinking heavy though for 4 years after the tragedy, and I went through EMDR therapy. That helped tremendously with like the shame and guilt, but I wasn't willing to admit I was an alcoholic. And you know, I talked a lot about my experience with drugs earlier, and I think it's important because I had no clue what recovery was. And this time, when I was trying to stop the thoughts in my head and stop drinking, it just was not possible. So I just kept going and kept going. And it got to the point where I was so sick, I didn't even want to do it. I just needed to do it to get out of this. You know, that was my mental escape. And I'm getting in trouble with the cops, getting in fights. And they're kind of like, whoa, Brennan's kind of going through it. And it got to the point where like, we're fucking done with you. Like this whole shit is done. You know, they said it very nicely and very kindly. They said, this is it, man. Like you're going to go to jail. Like something's going to stick. Like the next person you beat up down here, like we're going to throw you in jail. I'm like, well, he deserved it. He slapped his wife, or, you know, he started it, all this bullshit. And I'd gone through EMDR, and truth be told, it was extremely helpful, but it just didn't touch the alcohol. My counselor was like, hey, when do you want to talk about your drinking? And I'm like, never. See you later. Thanks for the help. Bye. You know, she had helped me free my mind from the torment that I experienced of what I had witnessed. And like, you know, I don't want to be graphic, but like there was a period of time I didn't eat red meat, man. Like I couldn't because of the smells and the textures and everything. And it was like, I couldn't do it. And it was just like every day. And then you have a million people that are wanting to support the families, and they're reaching out and they're writing letters, which is amazing. Or they have a t-shirt on or a sticker. And for me, I'm mad because I'm like, every time I see that, it's just a reminder. And it's not like I'm reliving the loss. Like I'm reliving everything that I experienced in that moment. And throughout that entire time leading up to the lawsuits, the issues around that, and the city pensions, trying to fight with the wives, and just all this stuff. And there's multiple times where I put a gun to my head and I'm like, man, please just let me pull the fucking trigger. And I couldn't. And every time I think of my little daughter, man, just dancing around or smiling. And I'm like, dude, you got to keep fighting. You have to stay in the fight. And this pastor kept meeting with me. And I was like, man, he kept hitting me up. I was like, let's grab lunch. My youth pastor. You show up drunk and high. Sit there, a Gatorade bottle, Fireball, and red Gatorade, and be sitting there drinking. He's like, man, I thought you were always great at sharing. I was like, all liquored up. You know, had enough liquor in me to be able to have the courage to share what God's love is. I couldn't see it sober-minded. And 2 weeks before, not even 2 weeks before my brothers had passed, we were sitting down for lunch, and quite a few of them were believers. Majority of them were, and either new in their faith or, you know, had a spiritual connection. And two guys were talking about the story of Job. Don't know if you know the Bible. Story of Job, a man that lost everything, right? Devil came after him, took his kingdom, took his family, took his wealth, his land, his money, his food, gave him sickness. And the devil was trying to convince God that he can make him break. And Job remained faithful to God. And, you know, I had some crew members who were talking about this story. And one of the guys I looked up to, someone was like, Clayton, what would you do in this? And he was like, man, I'd keep my faith, you know? And that kept in the back of my head. And so when I met with this pastor finally, I was like, man, maybe I could scare this dude off. Like if I tell him enough stuff, like maybe this dude will like leave me alone. Stop trying to meet with me. He's like, hey, I brought you lunch, whatever. And I'm like, all right, cool. And we'll go out to lunch and we're chatting, and enough people knew that I was causing ruckus. Like it was every other week I was getting in a fist fight, like every other week, you know, just putting hands to face. And it was like street justice, you know, like, oh, he stole my purse. I'm fast. I can catch him, you know. See some dude smack his wife. No, you don't put your hand on women. You're getting your hands put on you, you know. Come up to me, say something I don't want to hear, like say, care how big you are. And I had a death wish, dude. I had a shoulder injury, prescription pills kind of hovered in and out. I'd probably say like 15 or 20 of them in total. I was pretty fortunate. And we're chatting and I'm telling him all these things. And I'm waiting for this guy to be like, well, you're going to burn in hell, you know? He's like, all right, when are you going to stop making dumb decisions? I was like, I don't know, man. I don't think I'm making dumb decisions. Like I haven't been arrested yet. Like everything in my eyes above the court of law. Just a effing delusion.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Of like justifying why I just beat this dude up. Like one night, some guy tripped my now wife and she fell. And this is like towards the tail end. And I'm like trying to not get in a fight. I'm like, dude, you have to control your alcohol. You're going to get arrested. I go over there and my wife's crying. And I'm like, hey man, I don't want to fight you, but you need to apologize. And he tells me to F off and spits at the ground. I'm like, walk away. So I got to walk away and two of my buddies are with me. They're like, duck. And I duck and the dude has swung on me. I'm like, here's my pass. I beat him up and down the street till the cops got there. Like, what are you doing? And Pastor Bob, it didn't faze him, man. It didn't faze him. I grew up in Cleveland, worked with inner city youth, and knew a lot of the handful of guys on the crew and watched me grow up and kind of in and out. And he's like, all right, let's meet next week. And so we were meeting once a week, you know, maybe once every 2 weeks. And he starts up this recovery Bible study. He's like, and back then, this is 2016, 17, recovery was just popping in Prescott, right? And so his mission was like, hey, there's so many people up here. Like, I want to share Christ with them and be a part of the solution within our community. And so he started doing this Bible study. We had about 15, 20 guys at first that were showing up. And I remember I go in there that first night, and I'm hearing all these dudes' stories, and Bob roped me in. He was super intelligent. He's a great leader and a good coach. He was a former collegiate athlete, a gymnast, and coached nationally. And I think he did some Olympic coaching. I think he almost made it to the Olympics too. Very in tune with how to work with people and build them up. He's like, hey man, I know you struggled with drugs before, and I know you don't think alcohol is a problem, so maybe you can come in and help these guys. And so I just, first time I went in there, just sat quiet, just listened. And I heard these stories of guys who were in treatment and they had nothing, like the typical stories, like came in with their shirt off their back. Their family doesn't want to help them. They've got health insurance, deductible, and everything's met, and they're fortunate to be there. And there's a few guys that are, well off, or a mixture, right? But I hear these stories of these guys with nothing, and I'm sitting there and I'm like, dude, you have life up. Like, you have life so backwards. I had a brand new truck, diesel, 2,500, whatever, Denali, had a house, 2 kids, job, work. Everything on the outside looked perfect. But on the inside, I was dead. And I remember just staying quiet at that meeting and just listening. I get in my truck and I just start crying. I'm like, man, I want that peace. And that next week was St. Patrick's Day. So the year previously, I got invited to spend time with Dropkick Murphys in Boston on St. Patty's Day, watch their show. Like, amazing, right? Mm. And I screwed that off because I was drinking. Got kicked out of the House of Blues on St. Patty's Day.
It's hard to do.
In Boston. It's hard to do. And the cop had said something to me that I didn't do, and I lost my shit. I was like, drop your belt, dude. Let's go. Come on. What do you want? And that guilt and shame of everything I had done had carried over. So I'm Irish. My family's from South Boston. My grandfather's from Ireland. It runs deep. And so I'm in Prescott, St. Patty's Day, with some friends who were out there for that incident. And they're like, you're not going to do what you did last time. I'm like, no, chill out. And we go out to eat. And usually by the time like appetizers hit the table, like I'm 5-6 drinks in. Like I'm moving with a purpose. Like I'm getting down. And the waiter was like, hey, are you sick? Like, feeling all right? Or you got an important thing to do tomorrow? I was like, nah, I'm not in the mood to drink. And dinner went on, didn't have a drink. Guys are a bunch of buddies about to go out. And they're like, hey man, do you want to go out? I'm like, nah, I got something really important in the morning. Like I got to catch a flight, or I got a meeting or something. And they're like, all right. I'm like, call me if you need a ride though. And I remember getting in my truck, and like for the first time, that urge to drink, like, it dissipated.
Wow.
And it was because of that recovery meeting. I remember praying to God, and I'm like, hey, if you're real, if you really do love me, if you really do care, obviously I can't do this on my own. Like, I'm incapable. And if you're the God that I'm being told you are, and I'd watch people go through similar stuff. And like the common denominator for me was that people had a spiritual experience, and then even deeper, people were believers in Christ. That's just my experience. Mm-hmm. And I knew I needed to have that, but I just wasn't willing to. And in that moment, I just surrendered. I was like, take it. Like, your shoulders are that broad. You died for this. Please take it. Because if not, I'm gonna die. I just was crying in my truck, and I'm like, this is it. Like, I don't have to do this anymore. And in the big book, it talks about, what's the word? I can't remember, but that obsession, the not feverish. What was it? Now I'm going to have to try and track it down. But it talks about that obsession and like how everything is leading up to this spiritual experience and cleansing yourself. And I had felt that. And it was just like crazy. It was insane. Like my friends were wondering, like, what's going on? And so that important thing I had that next morning was meeting with Bob. I'm like, man, I'm done, dude. I don't want to have to go to this dude and tell him another effing story how I messed up. Like it's getting old, you know? And we were chatting and I kept a secret from everybody for like 3 months. Fear of failure, huge, right? And still don't know what recovery is. Getting a taste. And I remember I told him one morning we met and I was like, hey man, I got 3 months. He's like, man, that's awesome. Why haven't you said anything? I'm like, I don't know, man. I don't want to let anyone down. You know, I don't want to fail. I don't want the pressure. He's all right. I'll keep it a secret. So that next night we go to group and now there's like 30 or 40 of us in this group and it's growing and expanding and people are coming and going and I'm watching people relapse, watching people OD. And I'm just like, man, I don't want that. Like I'm so lucky that I didn't fall back into that. So Bob's doing announcements. He's like, hey, we got a barbecue next week. We got service work on Saturday. And by the way, Donut's got 3 months clean. And I'm like, dude, I was pissed. Like I was mad when Eric told me, you quit today, you're going to quit the rest of your life and your daughter. But it's the exact words I needed to hear. And from then on, you know, I pick up 6 years in March.
Hell yeah.
Open a treatment center up in Prescott, hold fast recovery.
Yeah. Let's talk about what you're doing today.
Yeah.
Like, do your thing, touch on that, and then we could make sure people know how to reach out. Yeah.
And so there was like this transformation. And so I just made it a mission to keep showing up. And like I watched my life improve. Like my quality of life truly improved. And it was something I'd never experienced before, even in my youth. Like it was just phenomenal. So I kept showing up and the movie premiered 2018, Only the Brave. And I'd kind of done my duty of honoring my brothers. And that was kind of the last piece that I felt like I needed to commit myself to. And I was like, what's next? And I was praying one night and God was like, I want you to open a treatment center. I'm like, dude, you got the wrong guy. Like, I'm a knuckle dragging hotshot. Like I know nothing about business. I know nothing about therapy. And we opened a year later. And so it's just been my mission to give that back and give that opportunity and hopefully instill that same hope that's been in me and just carry that forward and just continue to work on myself and grow. And, you know, me and my wife got married. We've been married for 4 years almost. We had a son together. We have 2 kids as well. So my 2 daughters.
How old's your daughter now?
She's 11.
Wow.
And so
awesome.
like, you know, I'm trying to live this life out that is worth my brothers. And the beauty of that is it never will be. Like I'll never be able to attain that. And that's okay. I just have to live it for myself. But the last thing I want to do is I don't want their children to grow old and be like, man, Donut really effed that up. Like he could have done something. I don't want to be found in a bar. I don't want to be found in a jail cell. I don't want to die from an overdose. And I know none of us do, right?
Mm-hmm.
I want to be something that those kids, when they're older, they can at the very least say, I didn't waste my life, you know, and I want them, you know, my children and all of them to be proud, you know, and I can't please everybody. Right.
No. But
I want to live a life that, you know, carries on their legacy in a way that they'd be proud of. And I think I'm doing that. I feel like I am. And, the beauty in it is I'm young. So it's like, we're young. Right. And so like, we look back on what we've accomplished thus far. So it's like, I'm 31. I got another probably.
You've lived a full life.
Yeah. I got another probably 35 years of working. And so it's like, and it's not just me, like it's God in my life. It's my business partners. It's my sponsor. It's the people around me that are making me who I am today. I can't take any of this credit. Like I know that 100%. I wouldn't be here. No way. I have to have people smarter than me because I'm not smart. No, you're smart. No. I'm just relentless.
You are relentless. Going back to the first 90 days of the hotshot training. Insane. Yeah.
And that's the mindset that I try to carry over into the business world. And it's not as easy to transpire that into like typing, you know? I remember sitting at a desk and for the first few years, really. And I'm like, man, if I could just push up my way out of having to write emails, you know, if I could just run and not have to do this. But it's just been an amazing learning experience. And it was like, I had lived out my childhood dream of being a firefighter. And I had such an amazing experience in the fire service that I'll never let that tragedy take it away. I'll never let it take away the tools, the lessons, the love that I received from my brothers. And when I sought out to do what's next, I wanted to do what I felt like was impossible. And opening a treatment center was that. And it was like, if I fail, what do I have to lose? I tried to help people and I gave it 110%. And so, I mean, you own a treatment center, you know, like the ups and downs and all the different things, like the motivating factor for success comes down to like, how bad do you want to help?
Yeah, it's really competitive. People think, oh, you own a treatment center. That's so great. There's so much need, and there is, but you know, on the other side, there's a lot of beds in Arizona, and a lot of
addicts who don't want to get help.
Yeah, there's a lot of addicts that don't want to get help,
and we're trying to convince them, and we're trying to combat their disease, which is baffle and
delusion. You're in delusion, like you experienced, I experienced. So how do people maybe talk about your program a little bit, and how do people get a hold of you guys? You know, your guys' program is awesome. I've heard nothing but great things.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Likewise. We're up in Prescott, PHP-IOP with supportive housing. You know, honestly, call the 1-800 number, 1-800-351-6858. My cell phone, 928-589-4617. You know, check out the website, holdfastrecovery.com. You know, reach out on social media, whether to me or Holdfast. You know, and the biggest thing too, and I know you can speak to this too, is like, if we're not the fit, like we'll help you find the place.
Yeah.
So if you feel 100%. Comfortable reaching out more to you or more to me, just call. Like just take the initiative and take that leap of faith to know that like you're worth it. And I think that's so huge in today too with fentanyl. It's like, man, we could do another 3 hours on just that alone.
Yeah.
Of how powerful it is, and just it's a unique drug in itself, but it has the same effects. And so, you know, if you're struggling, I just hope that people reach out, and it's us, me, you, somebody we don't even know, like pick up the phone and, you know that you're worth it. So yeah.
Yeah, you're 100% worth it. Well, thanks again, Brandon. I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah.
And appreciate it, man. That was powerful.
Appreciate it.